السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وأنزل علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. Dear brothers and sisters, so today is an interesting one. We're going to talk about Prophet Saleh. It's a very detailed story. It's mentioned in no less than 26 places in the Qur'an. I doubt anyone realized that, because I hadn't realized that until I started preparing notes for this. It's 26 places in the Qur'an. It's in Surah Al-A'raf, in Surah Hud, of course, Surah Al-Hijr, in Surah Al-Shu'ara, Surah An-Naml, no, I think so, it might be Ash-Shams. So it talks about the people, yes, that's true. It talks about the people in Surah Ash-Shams. And of course, Qur'an he recited from Surah Al-Halaqa, right, in which he talks about Ad and Thamud as well. And the list goes on and on and on and on, right? So it's mentioned in so many places within the Qur'an, over 26 times. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that there were 4 Arab prophets. So who are they? 4 Arab prophets, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, the authentic hadith. So Saleh, we know. We just talked about one last week. That's Hud, Shu'aib, and of course, the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in, inshallah, because we want to do it in one session. So after what happened with Ad, the survivors on the earth were again all believers, right? So at least for the people of Ad, maybe not the whole world, but the people of Ad, anyone that survived were only from the believers. And they had children, but all of those believers, those original believers who witnessed by eye what had happened, they all died out. And instead, new generations took over, and they were not able to take the lessons from the events of past. And this is why whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions these stories, right, throughout the Qur'an, more than half of the Qur'an are qasasul anbiya, or stories. And why is it that Allah uses stories? نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. Allah says in Surah Yusuf that we relate to you the most beautiful of stories, the most beneficial of stories, the best of stories. Why? Because the human being benefits through stories in ways that you would not benefit and you would not understand in the abstract. Someone tells you an idea, it's different from when it's illustrated in a tangible way. There are عِبْرَةً لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَعْقِلُونَ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. So many places within the Qur'an, يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is hoping that we'll reflect, we'll come back, we'll ponder, we'll understand the meanings. And we already talked about how ibrah comes from which word? Ibrah means lesson, right? So it comes from which preposition? You thought I was going to leave it alone, huh? From abra, which means to cross. So why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't just tell us, oh, the plot of the story is, right? When I brought this up, I said, you know, growing up, there were people who read the novel in English class, and there were people who read the Cliff Notes, right? You guys know about Cliff Notes? So those are for people who don't want to read the story, they don't want to do the work, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He could just give us the Cliff Notes. Why can't we have an abridged Qur'an, a summary of the Qur'an? Why don't we read that as Muslims, right? It'll be more efficient. Take out the repetition. Remove all the repetition from the Qur'an, right? And we come up with something new in which is just like very efficient and it's just like bullet points for the Qur'an. Why don't we do that? Because then we won't make the connections ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes tells us a story without breaking it down. Because then we have to pause for a moment and say, what does that mean? Why did that happen? Why didn't that happen? Why did they do that? So there will be indications within the surah, within the ayat, that will cause us to reflect. And when we get the meaning, it hits us in a much deeper way. In a way that it really, ulul albab, the people that have a lub, that have a deep core, it will stick with them. They will read. I always go back to Surah Yusuf, because Surah Yusuf, it has a guideline for your whole life, practical in terms of emotional situation. So you go through grief. Then when you're in that moment, you're like, oh, it's just like this. Or you have a difficult situation where you need patience. Or you're a father and you're dealing with kids. Or you're a kid dealing with parents. Or you have a sibling situation. So you're going to go back to the verse that applies. And you can say, oh, I'm not the first one to experience this. Even the best of creation had that. Now, this story about Thamud is also a lesson in social class. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mentions in numerous cases that the issue within Thamud was class-based. Now, this is interesting because it wasn't so much like that. It started to happen with Nuh, right? Because what did they say about the followers of Nuh? Who are they? That's right, aradhiluna. They said, they are the lowest class from among us. And what was deficient in their thinking? أراذلنا بادي الرأي. They are very backwards, right? It's a rough translation. بادي الرأي. They are simple-minded. They are, the uneducated class of people. So here, there's also a struggle within the social class. And over time, shaitan is successful in getting them to worship idols. And we notice, why is it that the same pattern happens again and again and again and again? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us. And shaitan, he uses the same strategies, the same techniques, the same lines again and again and again. Because they have the same teacher, so they use the same lines as a result. But this time, instead of statues, right, and idols, even though they had their idols, they had their statue. The main idol of the people of Thamud was themselves. And I think this is also very instructive, because in the world that we live in, it's very similar. People have idols and an idol is any object of your affection, right? So celebrities you can idolize celebrities, right? You can have idol worship, hero worship. People can regard certain personalities as having that level of status, or you can make your own opinions and your own values. أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. So have you seen the one that makes his own desires, his own whims, his God? So you can idolize that, you can put it on a pedestal, right? And they use their own standards in determining what was right and what was wrong. And so the idolatry that they followed, they did worship idols, but it was symbolic. They paid homage to these idols. Their worship was symbolic. It was identity-based, right? Now this is interesting, because religion, for many people, is becoming identity-based. And I'm very concerned about Muslims, because there are a lot of people, I'm not going to call out names, but when we think about Muslim politicians and Muslim celebrities and musicians and so on and so forth, many of them are out there in the public sphere, right? And they have a very strong Muslim identity, right? They're out there, and they might be taking interviews in magazines and TV and so on and so forth, but their religious values are not a part of who they are. It's only an identity. So on one hand, they're promoting a Muslim identity, which is a good thing, because as they say, representation matters, right? So there's a lot more Muslim representation today than there was in the past. But in terms of something substantive, someone that represents Muslims in the political sphere, in the public arena, in the public sphere, we can hardly think of anyone that represents Islamic values, right? And so this is something which is similar to the people of Thamud. They had a very strong religious identity, but they were not spiritual people, right? So this is a little bit different from some of the civilizations that came before, some of the people who came before, who really thought like, oh, this idol is gonna, my life is in the hands of this idol. The people of Thamud, they didn't think that. They had idols, but they were just objects of adoration, right? They weren't deeply spiritual people, but they had that identity, especially because it was connected to tradition. Now, the people of Thamud were the most technologically advanced and intellectually advanced people that the earth had ever seen, more so than Ad, right? And so here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is another tangent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed the people of Ad, right? And Thamud are the cousins of Ad. They are really the descendants of Ad. You know, not a direct connection, but just one over. So you can say the cousins of Ad. So they have a common forefather. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed Ad, and here it is that after Ad you have Thamud. So what does that tell us about Allah? The fact that He sends a prophet to the people of Thamud. That itself shows the renewal. That shows the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He gave them a chance, they rejected the message, and again Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a prophet to the children of Ad, giving them another chance to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it shows that even the worst people that Allah has destroyed, He still gives a second chance. There's an opportunity for another chance. Now the people of Thamud are located north in an area that is known as Al-Hijr. I think in English they call it Hegra, right? In Al-Hijr. And this is a very mountainous, very rocky region in the northern area of Arabia, which is going into Jordan and going into Palestine, but more so Jordan and Saudi Arabia today. Now the people of Thamud were huge human beings. It's not like they were tall. They could be described as giants because they were enormous and their dwellings were large and they were given many gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I mentioned before earlier, we were talking about the size of people and whether they were all tall. And I said, well, I'm a little bit skeptical. But in the case of Thamud, this has been described in the Qur'an and the Sunnah, that they were exceptionally large and tall and big. And so in the case of Thamud, this one we know that they were humongous, and they were probably the largest people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have sent, but they were regular human beings despite their size. And they had these huge dwellings. They had so much wealth that they forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they indulged so much that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a reminder to them in the form of a prophet from a very wealthy, from a very well-respected, from a very noble family. And this is another wisdom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, especially when He talks about Ad and Thamud, وَإِلَىٰ عَادٍ أَخَاهُمْ صَالِحًا وَإِلَىٰ عَادٍ أَخُوهُمْ هُودًا. And then He mentions that He sent to Thamud, وَإِلَىٰ ثَمُودَ أَخَاهُمْ صَالِحًا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions how He sent, in both of them He uses the same phrase, that He sent أَخَاهُمْ, أَخُوهُمْ, their brother. That it was somebody, and then later on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked, إِنَّ لَكُمْ, surely we are marjuwan, we had high hopes for you. You were our prodigy. We were looking up to having you as a leader. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't send them a nobody. He sent them someone that was known to have the highest standards of ethics and morality and class and lineage and position within the society. Who does that remind you of? The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning this about Ad and Thamud, then in a way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing it to the target audience. That in addition to these Arabian prophets, there is one also who benefits from the same social position. Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends prophets of that stature. And this is also connected to the question of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends messengers that are male, right? Because there are 25 that are mentioned in the Qur'an, and these are all male. As you know, I've shared before, I happen to believe that Allah sent 124,000 prophets. So I happen to think that why is it not possible that some of them are women? If Allah wanted to say that all the prophets have to be men, He could have said it in the Qur'an, but He didn't say that. So I took that to mean that it's possible that some of the prophets are women. But out of the 25 that are mentioned, if we don't consider Maryam or the mother of Musa or some other possible candidates, if we ignore that for now, the 25 that are mentioned in the Qur'an are all male, right? And all of the messengers are all male, right? That part we know, right? So why is it the case that these messengers are male and none of them are women? So this is connected to why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only chose people from certain social status. Does it mean that the people are not equal? Of course not. As we know in the Qur'an, all of the people are exactly equal regardless of wealth and position and lineage and whatnot and so on and so forth. Everyone is the same before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the prophets are not there based on their inherent value and worth. They are sent with a mission. Everybody with me? So the value, the importance is that the Prophet has to be able to fulfill the mission based on the realities of the society that exists at that time. And so this is one of the key reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will only send prophets from specific families. It doesn't mean that they're superior to other people, but it means that those families are able to fulfill the mission in a way that others cannot do. And that applies to gender as well. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His divine wisdom, selected that these 25 will be all male, because they will be able, in a patriarchal society, they will be able to deliver and be successful in the message in a way that a woman would not be able to do. Because the people would never accept a female prophet. If the prophet was given that kind of public message or that kind of public position. Now, the reason I mentioned that I think it's possible for women to be prophets is because when we think of 124,000 prophets, right, which is not like precise, the hadith is up to debate, but we know for sure that the number is huge in terms of the total number of prophets, whether that's the exact number, right? But let's accept that as true for now. Then that means that not all of them have a wide mission in which they need to deliver to a great number or a big number of people. So we don't need to make that assumption in that case. So hopefully that's clear, inshallah. So they had wanted to appoint him, Saleh, as their leader, because they recognize him as the most intelligent person. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَإِلَى ثَمُودَ أَخَاهُمْ صَالِحًا قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُمْ مِنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ هُوَ أَنشَأَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ وَاسْتَعْمَرَكُمْ فِيهَا فَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ ثُمَّ تُوبُوا إِلَيْهِ إِنَّ رَبِّي قَرِيبٌ مُجِيبٌ. And to the people of Thamud, we sent their brother Saleh. That's the ayah we talked about before. He said, "O my people, i'budullah, worship Allah," meaning worship Allah alone. You have no God other than Him. He is the one huwa alladhi ansha'akum min al-ard. He is the one that produced you from the earth. وَاسْتَعْمَرَكُمْ فِيهَا. Now, if you belong to ICCP, you know this ayah very well, right? Have you guys heard this ayah before? I think this is one of Dr. Tariq's favorite ayat because he mentions it all the time. وَاسْتَعْمَرَكُمْ فِيهَا. He has settled you on the earth. So, in the past, Dr. Tariq, he mentions it frequently because he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to develop the earth in a fruitful, in a beneficial way. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He is the one that established you on the earth. He produced you from the earth and He allowed you to build civilizations. This is one of the possible meanings. So seek His forgiveness and turn to Him in repentance. Surely my Lord is ever near, all responsive to prayer. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the very famous ayah, وَكَانُوا يَنْحِتُونَ مِنَ الْجِبَالِ بُيُوتًا آمِنِينَ. They carve their homes, يَنْحِتُونَ مِنَ الْجِبَالِ, in the mountains, on the face of the mountain, on the tops of the mountain, بُيُوتًا آمِنِينَ. So they were feeling secure, right? This is in the Arabic grammar, whenever you use that, it's called hal. So they were yanhituna aminin. So this is a very unique construction in the Arabic language in which you are describing their condition at the time of carving, at the time of completing the carving. وَيَنْحِتُونَ مِنَ الْجِبَالِ بُيُوتًا آمِنِينَ. So what does that mean? That means that they would carve out of the rocky mountain homes. They would qusuran, they would build palaces, min suhuliha, that's in the valleys. They would carve inside the cliffs. They would use tools to create rooms and hallways, right? Elaborate buildings with multiple stories, all on the face of mountains. And what happened after they built all of this? By the way, they didn't normally live in these houses, as we mentioned. Just like with the case of Ad, these were their mountain resorts. So they would come and they would visit there, and they would just enjoy the time, spending time there. But they would also have their palaces that were in Suhuliha, that were in the valleys, that were in the level parts of the land. But when they built these giant palaces, it had a psychological impact. They began to say, well, nothing can harm us because we are so high. We are physically elevated. What can destroy us? So they would think. They said, can wind do us any harm? What is wind in the face of a mountain? Wind versus mountain, forget it. What about water? What if there is a flood again? Can water do anything to us? No, we are on the tops of the mountain. Water versus the rock. We're safe. What if there's an earthquake? These rocks have been here for thousands of years, maybe millions of years before even people existed. They've been around since before the dinosaurs, right? So, can an earthquake do anything to this solid rock? So they felt aminin. They felt very secure. Now Saleh, coming from this well-regarded family, very intelligent, they had prepared to give him leadership of their tribe, of their people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the interaction. إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ أَخُوهُمْ صَالِحٌ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ. When their brother Salih said to them, أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ, will you not fear Allah? إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ. I am truly a trustworthy messenger to you. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ. So fear Allah and obey me. وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَىٰ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And this is interesting because this is mentioned in so many places in the Qur'an. وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ. I do not ask you for any reward in exchange for this message. I don't want anything materially from you. I don't need anything from you. In ajriya illa ala rabbil alameen. The reason I don't need anything from you is because my ajr, my reward, is from the Lord of the worlds. So what could you provide in comparison to what Allah is going to extend for me? Every prophet warned the people without expecting any monetary compensation, without seeking any material benefit. Why is this so important? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ مَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. So this says قُلْ. So that means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to who? Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in which he says, I don't expect anything back from you except al-mawaddata fil qurba, the love of Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Unfortunately, the Ummah didn't really do a very good job in that regard, but there are people who are sincere and loving towards the family of the Prophet ﷺ, and that will continue until the Day of Judgment. But the reason that this has to be emphasized again and again and again is because the integrity of the message cannot be maligned. The integrity of the Prophet, of the Messenger, is of paramount importance. Nobody can say, oh, he wants to be a leader. Oh, he's doing this because he wants to get married, because he wants to be the chief, because he wants to collect money. And this is also a good lesson for us, because when we see our religious leaders compromise themselves for political positions in order to acquire money, then what do the people say? They say these are ulama as-salatin. I don't mean to repeat it, these are pejorative terms that people use. But I'm saying it because people use them, right? I'm not saying that this is something that we should say, but people, they say these are the scholars that belong to the sultans, that belong to the leaders, because their integrity has disintegrated, because they see that, the king says jump and they jump. So then it's no longer beneficial. Now there are cases in which the scholars should be cautious about delving into politics. There are. And it might be perceived by some people, right? So as I mentioned before, I used to attend the classes of Sheikh Sa'id Ramadan al-Buti, and he was assassinated, in Damascus, because some people felt that he was in support of the government, but in reality he never said so. But he stayed silent, and people regarded that as not being supportive of the revolution. But there are many scholars who stayed silent because they did not want to get involved in a conflict that they knew would be very bloody and that would be very complicated. So we should give husnul dhan. We should give the benefit of the doubt to scholars, because they might have some perception or wisdom about the situation that we might not understand. Early on in that revolution, people thought that, oh, we're going to put a few signs in the street, then the military rule is going to be like, okay, protesters, what would you like? We'll give you everything that you want, and then, that will be the end of it. But as we know, it ended in a war in which millions, really millions in Syria have died from that. And let alone all of the refugees, the biggest refugee crisis in history, since World War II. This is the biggest refugee crisis in many, many generations. So the reason I mentioned that is because we should take a lesson from that our honesty and integrity should always be maintained. So no one can attack us. Not because, is there a problem if Saleh said, yes, I'd like to be the boss, I want to be the chief. Maybe it would be a good thing. Maybe it's beneficial for Saleh to be the chief, because if he's the chief, he can make good changes, right? But if he had said that, then people would say, oh, you only want to be a prophet because of that. That's your motivation. So your motivation has to be maintained. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions their arguments. قَالُوا يَا صَالِحُ قَدْ كُنْتَ فِينَا مَرْجُوًّا. We mentioned this. قَبْلَ هَذَا مَرْجُوًّا قَبْلَ هَذَا أَتَنْهَانَا أَن نَعْبُدَ مَا يَعْبُدُ آبَاؤُنَا وَإِنَّنَا لَفِي شَكٍّ مِّمَّا تَدْعُونَا إِلَيْهِ مُرِيبٍ. They argued, "O Saleh, we had high hopes for you before this. كُنَّ لَنَا مِن قَبْلَ هَذَا. You are marjuwan قَبْلَ هَذَا. We thought that you could be this amazing person. You are this prodigy. How dare you forbid us to worship what our forefathers had worshipped?" Oh, the same forefathers thing again. Again and again. Our daddy said it, so we're going to do the same thing. We are certainly, this is another lesson for us. Many of us, the way we practice religion, we're just doing it. We saw somebody go to this place, so we go to that place. We saw somebody do this prayer, so we do that prayer. We don't question critically that, is this something, right, which is in conformity with the Sharia? Does this agree with the Qur'an? Does this agree with the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? We should be very cautious about tradition, right? Because our religion, you'll never find anything in the Qur'an that emphasizes or encourages people to do it based on tradition. Everything in the Qur'an encourages you to be a critical thinker. And the litmus test is the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If it doesn't pass this test, then we don't do it. So and this is mentioned in all of the prophets, because the disbelievers are the ones that said that, oh, we're following our forefathers. أَوَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ. What if their forefathers, they didn't have any sense? They were completely irrational. Then you'll be completely misguided. Figure out whether this is a good example for you to follow, and then follow it. We are certainly in alarming doubt about what you are inviting us to. Now this ayah is interesting because it says, وَإِنَّنَا لَفِي شَكٍّ, we are in doubt, مِمَّا تَدْعُونَنَا, to what you are guiding us, إِلَيْهِ مُرِيبٍ. So doubt is mentioned twice. They said, we would have made you our leader, and now you're trying to stop us. We have doubt about what you're saying. We can't believe it. There's no credibility. And they said, we are in clear doubt. It's mentioned again, and there are various places in the Qur'an, فِي رَيْبِهِمْ يَتَرَدَّدُونَ, right? فِي شَكٍّ مُرِيبٍ. See how many places in the Qur'an Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the people who are hesitant in their doubt. They are doubtful about their questioning. So verse after verse, it means, and I've mentioned this before, how our religion teaches us to ask questions, to learn, to expand our horizons, but not to question for the sake of questioning. Because if you start finding holes and looking for doubt, then you're going to end up more confused. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاذْكُرُوا إِذْ جَعَلَكُمْ خُلَفَاءَ مِنْ بَعْدِ عَادٍ وَبَوَّأَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ تَتَّخِذُونَ مِنْ سُهُولِهَا قُصُورًا وَتَنْحِتُونَ الْجِبَالِ بُيُوتًا فَاذْكُرُوا آلَاءَ اللَّهِ وَلَا تَعْثَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ مُفْسِدِينَ. Remember when He made you khulafa, successors, after Ad, and established you in the land, and you built palaces on the plains and carved homes into the mountains. So remember Allah's favors, and do not go about spreading corruption in the land. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions civilizations, how He established them on the earth. And when He talks to Thamud, He talks about Ad, because the punishment of Ad can also happen to Thamud. So what did they say about him? They said he's a madman. That's always the first thing, right? They said that he is majnoon. They said the same thing about the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We heard the same thing in the end of Surah Al-Halaqa in the second rak'ah. Our Anas was reciting, أَمْ يَقُولُونَ تَقَوَّلَ أَمْ يَقُولُونَ شَاعِرٌ نَتَرَبَّصُ بِهِ رَيْبَ الْمَنُونَ. They said that he is a kahin, they said he is a sha'ir, they said he is a majnoon, so on and so forth, a magician, a soothsayer, a madman. Now, it looks like Shaitan is a one-trick pony, because every time he's got the same story again and again and again. And that's because all of these people are listening to the same person, to the same Shaitan. So he's recycling the same lines. So what did they say? قَالُوا إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مِنَ الْمُسَحَّرِينَ. Because they couldn't attack him. This is similar to the Prophet ﷺ, because who was he to them? He was as-sadiqul ameen sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they couldn't say that, oh, he's a bad person, he has bad intention. Who would believe that? Because they only knew good from him. So similarly, Saleh had a similar position within the society. So they said he is min al-musahharin. He has been touched by magic, right? It's not he's a magician, but he has been made crazy, whether it's a jinn or magic or something like that. And their arrogance caused them to be offensive. So the best defense is a good offense, right? So they took a note from that. And they came up with a challenge. Now this challenge is going to backfire on them. But they came up with a challenge to bring a sign. So they said, مَا أَنْتَ إِلَّا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُنَا فَأْتِ بِآيَةٍ إِن كُنْتَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ. You are only a human being like us, so bring forth a sign if what you say is true. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Qamar, He mentions, كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ بِالنُّذُرِ. Thamud rejected the warnings as well. Now, and actually, bin nudur, so it's also not only the warnings, but bin nudur, it means they rejected all the warners. So who are all the warners? Isn't it just Saleh? So it could be the warners that came before, but most likely, the best way of thinking it is that it's not just Saleh, it's also his followers. Right? So all the believers are also there telling them that don't make this mistake, worship Allah alone. So there are other people. It reminds us of the story of Musa, right? And Musa and Fir'aun. There were other people, right? Even min qawmi Musa. There was even a believer from the family of Pharaoh, right? That had hidden his faith. So there are good people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hidden in positions of power and influence, right? That are there to warn and to hold the evildoers from perpetuating what they want to perpetuate. Then Allah says, فَقَالُوا أَبَشَرًا مِنَّا وَاحِدًا نَتَّبِعُ إِنَّا إِذًا لَفِي ضَلَالٍ وَسُعُرٍ. So they argue, how can we follow Bashara minna? He's a regular guy. He's a regular Joe. He's an average human being from among us. He doesn't even look special. He doesn't stand out. Bashara minna. We would then truly be misguided. And that would make us insane. We would be crazy to do that. And they said the same thing about the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? That he is only bashar, he's a human being. How, if only you had sent down malaka, if you had sent down an angel, then we would follow this angel because we need somebody special. So then they said, we're going to get what you want. So they said, let's make something up. Now there was a massive rock in the middle of the people of Saleh, and they said, we want a huge naqa, a she-camel, to emerge from this stone and rock. Now is that a big ask? That is a huge ask. For the rock to split and for a she-camel to come out. And then another one said, no, we need it to be 10 months pregnant. Another one said, it needs to be so big. The pregnancy of the camel is more than that, you know that, right? So it's not 9 months for a camel. And then, does anybody remember? I think it's 14 months pregnancy for a camel. Does anybody know? No Bedouins in the house? I guess not. I think it's 14 months, but don't quote me on that. But it's not 9 months for sure. Another one said, it has to be so big, it has to be so gigantic. It's beyond, it needs to be beyond our imagination. Another one said, no, it has to be red colored. Another one said, no, it needs to have thick wool around it. Another one said, no, the ewe should be like this. Another one said, it needs to drink the water of the whole valley. Another one said, no, we need to get milk from this camel. Did we get the 15? I was pretty close, right? Okay, 15 months. I had heard 14 months. Oh, it says 14? Okay, 12 to 14. Okay, alhamdulillah. I had heard 14, but I heard it from, this is what the Bedouins told me, so, another one said that it has to have enough milk for the whole town, right? From this one camel. And then, the left people on the left and the right and some guy from the back, he's like, no, it needs to be like this. So everybody is adding on, piling on the request to make the list longer. Now, why are they making the list so long? Are they really serious about Saleh bringing a naqa? No. They are ridiculing Saleh. That, I want it to be like this, I want it to be like that, right? To make the list to torment him. No one imagined that he could possibly do it. And then when they finally finished and they ran out of ideas, he said, are you done? Are you finished with your list? They said, yes, we're done. He said, now if I bring the naqa exactly like what you have requested, will you then believe in me? And they all said, of course we will. Why wouldn't we? We will believe in you. And he said, okay, because if you don't, then Allah can surely punish you. And Saleh said, then gather all of the people Now this is interesting because whenever we think about gathering all of the people, we think of one or two prophets especially. So which prophet waited until everybody was all gathered? So our Prophet ﷺ, right, in the coming and warning them in the mountain of As-Safa, right? But there's one especially that I had in mind. Musa alayhi salam, يوم الزينة وأن يحشر الناس ضحى. Right? This is the most dramatic scene in the whole Qur'an, in which all of the people are there because that is their main festival day. Right? And then it's going to be, this battle royale between the Prophet Musa and the angels. Right? And then who's going to go first? Who's going to throw the snake? Right? And then of course the snake of this al-asa, فَأَلْقَى عَصَى فَإِذَا هِيَ حَيَّةٌ تَسْعَى. So فَإِذَا هِيَ ثُعْبَانٌ مُبِينٌ. So it becomes this huge serpent and it swallows. تَلْفِقُ مَا يَلْفِقُونَ. It swallows and snatches up all of those snakes. Right? And then of course we also have the example of Ibrahim, in which all of the people were out and he destroyed the idols except إِلَّا كَبِيرُهُمْ, except for the biggest of the idols and leaving the hammer over there. So Saleh does the same technique in which he says, well, everybody needs to gather. Everybody came, they come in front of the rock and he asks Allah to take out that naqa just as it was described. So he says, وَيَا قَوْمِ هَذِهِ نَاقَةُ اللَّهِ لَكُمْ آيَةٌ. Right? This is the she-camel of Allah. It is a sign, an ayah for you. فَذَرُوهَا تَأْكُلْ فِي أَرْضِ اللَّهِ. So don't mess with this. This is a miracle from Allah. So leave her. Right? You need to leave her to graze freely on Allah's earth. وَلَا تَمَسُّوهَا بِسُوءٍ. Don't even dare to harm this animal in any way. Or فَيَأْخُذَكُمْ عَذَابٌ قَرِيبٌ. If you do so, there will be a very swift punishment that is going to overtake you. Now what happened with the people of Thamud? Did anybody accept the message? Now believe it or not, there were a lot of people that did. Right? And this is what was concerning. The community became split. Right? Now it wasn't everybody, and this is another. Remember, both Dr. Tariq and I, we both gave a khutbah recently. So you guys should be experts on the hadith of the ship. Anyone know the name in Arabic? Hadith as-Safina. So we both talked about it in the same month, right? So we got different perspectives and different angles. So what was the problem? Why did the ship start sinking? That's right. Somebody made a hole in the bottom of the ship thinking that he was making the right choice because now he doesn't have to disturb the people on the top in order to get water. So that is a lesson in how a few people can mess it up for everybody. And if you grow up in a house with a lot of brothers and sisters, you know how it is. Okay? You always have that one troublemaker that makes mom and dad mad, and then everybody gets punished, and then you can't go to Disney World or wherever you were supposed to go because of that one brother, or it could be one sister, but there's always somebody that causes a problem, right? So it's the same thing that happened with Thamud. The community got split. And some people say, what do we do now? What do we say? How do we respond to this? Because people saw it, right? وَأَنْتُمْ تَنْظُرُونَ وَإِذْ فَرَقْنَا بِكُمُ الْبَحْرَ. Allah talks about Musa and how Allah split the sea while you were watching with your very eyes. So they saw the naqa emerge from this stone. They couldn't deny it. It was exactly the one that and the level of it backfired on them. Because if it was just like a general camel, they could have, oh, it's just a camel, nothing special. But because they had customized it, right? This is a custom camel, all right? This is, it's like nowadays people are into customizing their car and their color and this and that, right? It's got to be exactly that one. It can't. This is not the base model, right? This is a specialty camel. So they couldn't deny it. They couldn't, and they said, how can we say that it's magic, right? This was your dua. So some people, they came to the conclusion, they said, he's a real prophet. We don't want to believe in idols. We believe in Allah, Rabbul Alameen. There were a lot of people, and the numbers started to increase. Now when the people started to join and believe in Thamud, what did the wealthy people started to feel? They started to panic. The rich people started to debate. What do we do? What are we going to say? We're losing followers. They're going for Saleh. قال الملأ الذين استكبروا من قومه للذين استضعفوا لمن آمن منهم. So they started to apply pressure on them. أتعلمون أن صالحا مرسل من ربه. Are you really sure that he is sent by his Lord? قالوا إنا بما أرسل به مؤمنون. So the arrogant chiefs, they said, are you certain? They replied, we certainly believe in what he has been sent with. Then the camel came down. هذه ناقة الله لكم آية فذروها تأكل في الأرض ولا تمسوها. We mentioned that. This huge camel has this crazy appetite. It would drink from the springs of the water one morning from morning until night. After hours, after hours, after hours. And all of the camels from the townspeople, they had to wait. And they would go the next day, so they had to alternate days. They had to share days between the naqatullah and their own camels, right? So one day for them, and then the other day. So on the days that they're drinking water, then they're grazing. And then they would alternate, and then the one that was grazing, the other one would go for water. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this, وَنَبِّئْهُمْ أَنَّ الْمَاءَ قِسْمَةٌ بَيْنَهُمْ كُلُّ شِرْبٍ مُحْتَضَرٍ. This is from Surah Al-Qamar. And tell them that the drinking water must be divided between them and her, each taking a turn to drink every other day. Now they are living a miracle. This is the wisdom of the naqa. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't send down something out of stone. This is a live miracle that is living within their midst, that they can witness every day. This is very powerful stuff, right? And so the numbers of people believing are increasing because they're witnessing this camel. And then finally, the camel gives birth before their eyes. And then their belief increased even more. The elites met. What do? We're stuck. We thought that this challenge was going to work, and then it backfired. And now we're embarrassed, and this camel, it ended up being good for him. We should have just stayed, we should have shut up. Why did we say all of this? So they came up with a different plot. They said, our issue with the camel is not that the camel came down. Our issue is that the camel takes the whole day to drink. This is a pain in our butts, that Allah sent down this miracle, and now we have to do, how is this a benefit to us? It's taking the whole day to drink. We can't raise our farms. All of their animals are terrified of this huge, giant camel. They run away from her. And so what they plotted to do, there were 9 people. Remember I talked about Hadith al-Safina? So there were 9 people from the people of Saleh that they hatched this plot that they're going to kill the camel. Because they said Saleh is crazy, right? And so they killed this camel and also the baby camel, the child. And before executing the plan, they asked all of the townspeople. They said, if we do this, whose side are you on? Are you with us or are you against us? Will you stay with us? And the townspeople, they said, we're with you. Go for it. So even though they were not involved in the plot, they gave them the green light to go ahead and to do it. And when the camel came down, they jumped in front of them. Now these 9 people, they thought they were so, very tough. 8 of them were so terrified they ran away. But one of them out of the 9 was able to hit the leg of the camel. And then once he was successful in doing so, then the other 8 came back and they all jumped on the camel. But even after striking the camel was still alive. And they ran behind the camel and then they killed the camel. Look how intent they are on killing the naqa, the she-camel that was sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the people are all watching and they're cheering, and now their camels can drink every day. They think this is a good thing. And they slaughter it and they spread the meat to everyone. Everyone in the city ate except for Saleh and his followers. Now Saleh, he hears the news and he runs to the city to try and stop them. But what he finds is that everyone is eating from this meat. It's like, because it's a huge camel, the meat goes on and on and on. And they were so proud of what they had done. فَعَقَرُوا النَّاقَةَ وَعَتَوْا عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِمْ وَقَالُوا يَا صَالِحُ ائْتِنَا بِمَا تَعِدُنَا إِن كُنْتَ مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Again, look at the retransitions of them. Look at how unafraid they are that Allah is going to send down any punishment. Then they killed the she camel, defying their Lord's command, and they challenged Saleh. I'tina bima ta'iduna. We see this again and again. Bring us what you threaten. Bring it down. Let hell rain down. We're not afraid. If you are truly one of the messengers. Then he tells them, you have how many days? You have 3 days. Do whatever you need in these. Enjoy those 3 days. That's all that you get. فعقروها فقال تمتعوا في داركم 3 أيام ذلك وعد غير مكذوب. This is a serious matter. They killed her, so he warned them, you have only 3 more days to enjoy your lives in your homes. This is an unfailing promise, right? So the party of 9, they're not done. These 9 troublemakers, they come back, they get together. قالوا تقاسموا بالله لنبيتنه وأهله ثم لنقولن لوليه ما شهدنا مهلك أهله وإنا لصادقون. These 9, they get deep into plotting because they got away with it the last time. They said, let's keep going. تَقَاسَمُوا بِاللَّهِ. They all made an oath and a vow to God Almighty. They said, let us swear by Allah that we will take him and his family, the women, the children, the babies. We're going to take his whole family down by night. We'll do it at night. In Arabic, there's a way of saying it in night. لَنُبَيِّتَنَّهُ. Right? I don't know how to translate it into English. Then we certainly, so they have a plan because they need plausible deniability. So in the morning when they discover that everybody's dead, they're going to say, oh, it must be those 9 because they're the 9 that got the camel. So they said in the morning, لَنَقُولَنَّ لِوَلِيِّهِ, will say to his closest heirs, we didn't witness the murder. It wasn't me. I didn't know anything about it. مَا شَهِدْنَا. We didn't see anything out of the ordinary. We are definitely telling the truth. Then Allah says, وَمَكَرُوا مَكْرًا وَمَكَرْنَا مَكْرًا. Allah uses, right? وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. And so they hatched a plan. They made a plan, but we too made a plan, right? But the plan of them is ضعيفة. The plan of them is astray. وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. While they were unaware. Look at how bold and how secure they are. They don't think anything is going to happen to them, right? And they're so happy to get rid of them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends an instruction to Saleh to leave. He gets a warning, so they're never able to murder him. He leaves, and they're happy. They're celebrating that he left. Then their faces turn yellow, and they start to realize punishment is coming. The second day, everybody turned red in the face. Everyone is red. It got even more serious. They're like, red, this is yellow, okay. Could have been, maybe something medical, jaundice or something, right? Then it became red. Okay, that's kind of weird. Then on the third day, all their faces became dark black, and they said, something is coming. And then they were destroyed, the punishment after the 3 days. This is after a severe and a slow punishment. Now this is interesting because psychologically they realize that the punishment is coming. So, it's like they say in Arabic, al-intidaru ashaddu min al-maut, right? So waiting is worse than death, right? So if you know something is coming, I don't know about you guys, but I'm afraid of heights. So put me in a roller coaster. The roller coaster is not the scary part. Waiting in line is the scary part, right? Like, where the roller coaster goes up, that's where I'm dying inside, right? Once I'm in the roller coaster, I'm okay, because, like I'm still there. But the waiting, so there they are, they're waiting for the thing to drop, right? And they're experiencing every moment because of that anticipation. And they start to scream and to cry and to shout. In fact, people, they start to dig. It's said that they start to dig their own graves because they have nowhere to run. فَانظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ مَكْرِهِمْ أَنَّا دَمَّرْنَاهُمْ وَقَوْمَهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. See, what were the consequences of their plot? Remember they had this fancy plot? They never even got to execute it. We utterly destroyed them and their people altogether. It backfired big time because it was the reason for the punishment coming down. They went into their dwellings. Which dwellings? The palaces on the plains and the huge mansions in the mountains. And Allah sent a very unique punishment to Thamud, right? And I'm going to explain it in a different way, because Allah subhanahu, some people, they said that Allah sent them tremors and Allah sent them a loud shriek. But I want to present the idea that the two are the same, right? Because Allah describes both in the Qur'an. But I think it makes more sense to understand that in fact the two are the same. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends to them a sound wave, right? And the sound wave, that frequency causes vibration. Now this is unique because they were like, we're not afraid, water can't get us, heights can't get us, nobody can reach us in there. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them a unique punishment to suit their situation, something that they could not run away from, which was a very high or a very low frequency type of sound. So there was a mighty sayhatan wahida, a mighty blast that overtook them in the morning. And it was so loud and so intense that all of them were killed by that. And that sound also caused tremors, resulting in their hearts dropping and them physically dying from those tremors. It is الرجفة فأصبحوا في دارهم جاثمين. There is a sayha, there is a rajfa. Allah says, إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ صَيْحَةً وَاحِدَةً فَكَانُوا كَهَشِيمِ الْمُحْتَضِرِ. Allah says, indeed we sent against them only one mighty blast, leaving them كَهَشِيمِ الْمُحْتَضِرِ. This is crazy, intense description. They are like the twigs of the builders of fences. That means they were reduced to rubble. Just look like twigs thrown together. All of it. Despite all of their strength, they turned and they were annihilated. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have saved them, right? But when Saleh, he comes back to the scene and he sees them and he starts to think that, wow, Allah could have saved them if only they had listened to me. And he said, but rather, my people did not love an-nasihin. I was sent to advise them, but my people, they didn't like those who sincerely advise. Now there's another lesson for us here, that even among Muslims, sometimes Allah will send you a very unpleasant person, or somebody that doesn't like you, or somebody who's very critical, or somebody who's very judgmental. But they will send you a message or a critique that is accurate, right? And we reject the advice. We don't want to hear it from them. We don't want anyone to challenge us or to mess with us. So it's a lesson that we should be open to criticism and to critique, that because there are things that we can improve. Now Saleh and his wife, they die in Palestine in a place called Ramla. And in the Battle of Tabuk, the Prophet ﷺ passes through that area. The Madain Saleh, the people of Thamud, and there was a well of water. And so people, they drank from it, they wanted to drink from it, they collected, they used the water to cook some food, they took some utensils and rinsed it in that water. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, throw out all of the food, throw out all of the water and all of the utensils that you used, and don't even walk in these places, because this is the place of adhab. These are the places of Allah sending down punishment. Meaning that this is something for Allah sent for us to very thoughtfully ponder and to reflect, to hear and to listen. And so when Muslims, when we go to Petra, when we go to Madain Saleh in northern Arabia, right now it's being promoted as places of tourism. And people are kind of reticent to do so because they heard the hadith that when we go to such places, it should be a somber event. It should be a lesson for us, not a place of enjoyment and entertainment. So we understand in 2008 it was declared as a World Heritage Site. It is part of World Heritage. But people should not, we don't need like a gift shop and a cafe and tote bags, right, with Madain Saleh. Please don't do that. That's not what this is about. This is about learning a lesson, right? And then later on, there were civilizations. So the time period that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about is many hundreds of years before subsequent. So people think it's like the Nabateans, but the Nabateans came after, and they lived in the same place, and actually in the same cities. Within those ruins, people lived in those ruins for hundreds of years. The Nabateans, they have 131 tombs that are carved into the stone. But those are not the houses that are mentioned in the Qur'an. Those came later within the same site. And the only remaining descendants are from Banu Thaqif. And Banu Thaqif are the same people who are from At-Ta'if, right? So later on, everything comes full circle. So when the people of At-Ta'if are probably reading these verses from the Qur'an, they are hearing about their forefathers, right, and their own history. Now, so that concludes the entire story of Thamud and Saleh. Next week, inshallah, we will start our discussion of Prophet Ibrahim. And this, inshallah, will be very familiar, because the first one is about Ibrahim questioning his journey towards the truth. We were going to bring a little bit of a philosophical question, which is that, do we gain guidance through our own minds and reason, or do we gain guidance through revelation? So we're going to ask that question. That is Allah going to punish people because they didn't figure out Allah's existence? Right? So let's say somebody's in the desert or somebody's in an island and they never got revelation. So is that person responsible to figure out the way that Ibrahim figured out that there is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So that's, inshallah, a very important question that we'll discuss next time, inshallah. So I have the Zoom open as well, in case if there are any questions. We have a mic. In Ramla. Yes. Who wants to begin? Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Allah could have destroyed those 9 people who schemed
Yes.
the death of that.
Mhm.
But people question that, why he destroyed the whole nation of Samud.
Excellent question.
There's a big lesson here. That there was a silent majority.
Yes.
They did not do their part. They did not play a role in it to stop or criticize those big leader or whatever the big chiefs in there. So there's a lesson here. You cannot be silent when you see something wrong.
Yeah.
In your heart, all this kind of stuff. So that's a major thing. People always ask this question, why Allah is so brutal to destroy everybody?
Yeah.
But you have to really understand there is a wisdom behind it, that you were quiet. You did not do your part in the society to make sure that the haqq, or the right thing, is being promoted in that way, and stop the wrong thing. By every resource, every mean, whatever you have in that kind of thing. So the lesson of, don't be a silent majority. Play your part in the society when you see something is wrong. There are 9 people killed Naqatullah. Okay, so Allah could have destroyed those.
Right.
He said, hey, these are the bad guys, or the group of those people there, but the whole nation was destroyed. I just want to make.
This is one of the most important lessons, really, from the story. It reminds me of a statement, I think it's from Elie Wiesel, who is the Holocaust, the famous author, Holocaust survivor. So I think he said that all that's required for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. Perhaps you heard this before, right? He was a young child in Auschwitz, the concentration camp in World War II, Jewish. And his commentary is that in order, because, and people know from the stories of that time that there were 11 million people, right, in these concentration camps. About half of them were Jewish. Others are communists and gypsies and lots of other types of people, handicapped people. So how is it possible that the whole society allowed that to happen? Well, that means each individual person was like, well, what's the point in me saying anything, because it's going to happen anyway. But when you have a critical mass in which nobody's saying anything, so then bad people can get away with things. And we see that throughout human history, which is that when people see a wrong, they don't say anything. This is why the Prophet ﷺ said that if each person takes individual responsibility, فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ, they should stop it with their hand, if you're able to do so. And that requires wisdom, because there are situations in which you're stopping evil with your hand will cause more evil. So you shouldn't. That's why the Prophet said that if you're able to, فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ. So in those cases, then you go to the second phase, because there's situations where that would be foolhardy for you to do it. And that level of responsibility requires you to go against even people who you support. Right? The Prophet ﷺ said, "Unsur akhaka ظالما أو مظلوما." To support your brother, regardless of whether he is the one oppressing or he is the one being oppressed. So the Sahaba, they're like, okay, well, if he's the one oppressed, we understand how we can give him victory. But how can we assist the one who is doing the oppression? And the Prophet ﷺ said that you prevent him from that. And that is the way that you assist him, by stopping them. So that silence, that passivity is a type of tacit approval, right? And evil only can take hold within a society, right? So we think of more recently the genocide in Srebrenica. It's been more 25 years, right? We just this year is 25 years from the Srebrenica massacre in Bosnia, in which thousands of people, I have a friend of mine. He saw every single male relative, his father, his grandfather, and all of his uncles were killed. He's from Srebrenica. And in Bosnia, how is it possible? Does it mean that all Serbian people approved of that? No, of course not. But enough people within the society knew it and allowed it to happen. And that's how these type of evil within the world exists, is because so many people say, well, I can't do anything, so I'm going to stay silent. It doesn't mean that they want that to happen. But by staying silent, they facilitate it. And then it's fair for them to be punished. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did collective punishment only after all of the people had the opportunity to accept guidance and to stop them. Because those 9 people went to the town people and said that, do you agree with us? Are you with us or are you with Saleh? And they all said, we are with you. And so by not stopping them, they proved in action that they were against Saleh and they were against the sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, brother?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I don't. What is the status of 9 people back then? I don't know what the status were, or how powerful they were, but generally, we see things happen today in the world that we live in. I'm not going to be specific, but I can be specific in my country. Sierra Leone, we have the same problem.
Yeah.
We speak, but we believe Allah is there. Allah will take care of it. So basically, in a nutshell, it happens. It's happening today all over the world. So the status of the 9 people, I don't know what the status was for people to follow them. It said for them to stay silent or say something, but maybe I don't know how powerful they are.
Sure. I mean, there are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks in the Qur'an that yaktubu imanahu. There are people who keep their faith silent, right? And there are situations in which a person should stay silent, because if they, a person might be able to be more beneficial staying within a position. So let's say, right, if and this is the argument, but people can take it too far, because we see from Muslim politicians, they say, oh, if we talk about Palestine, we'll be unelectable, right? They're going to go after me. I don't know whether that's true, but people think that, right? And so the question is it better for them to be vocal, or is it better for us to be vocal in cases of injustice, in cases of corruption, in cases of wrongdoing, or should we be silent, because by being silent, at least we're a participant, at least we're in there. I think there's room in an intermediate position in which within a society, Muslims can still promote values without putting themselves in a situation in which they're in danger or they can be compromised, right? But we shouldn't be so willing to sell our faith, to sell our values, right? To sell it out for the highest bidder. And this is what we've seen in Islamic history. We've seen it in the end of the Ottoman Empire, for example. I mean, we need a whole class to talk about that. We saw it in Palestine. A lot of the land in Palestine was sold. It was not stolen, right? But as Muslims, it's very hard as an imam for me to talk about it. I'm going to upset someone, right, by saying it. But it happened in history, right? After World War II, after World War I, Lawrence of Arabia, and the Arabia, and even in Medina, it was almost basically a war, right? That was happening. So all of this is happening because there are some within the Muslims who have, even with the Mongols, the same thing. There have always been people who are ready to sell their faith. So we should be very cautious about that.
Again, Allah, let's act against Allah's plan.
I'm sorry? Allah's plan, yes. Of course, everything is Allah's plan, but we want to be on the side of al-haq. We want to be on the side of the truth. And it's better if, at least if it's like the people of a Sabt, right? There are some people, the story with a Sabt, they're throwing the nets, and then there are some people, they said that don't do that because this is wrong, then Allah will punish you. And the people who are throwing the nets, they said, you're just a few guys, are you going to stop us? You can't do anything. And they says, ma'adhiratan, we're not protesting in order to stop you. We know you're going to do what you're going to do. But when we meet Allah, we need to have an excuse with Allah. So we should not be so outcome oriented that, we are protesting or we're saying something in order to get this outcome. But in order so that way we maintain our integrity. That is the important part, even if we're not able to stop it. Yes. Yes. Allah talks about it in seemingly very positive ways. Yes. Yes.
But their mind was messed up.
Hmm.
So that was the problem they had.
Mhm.
So that's where they were level of their different thinking.
Hmm.
So when you become smart and you're trying to think of things that you start innovative and other wrong things, that's what's leading them into a corruption and other things.
But think about it. I mean, if you look at Nobel Prize winners, if you look at some of the most innovative and intelligent people, and you ask them, do you believe in God? Only a small percentage believe in God. They believe in science. But if you ask them, well, where did we come from? They don't have an answer. Well, that doesn't sound very intelligent, right? So, there's a bit of irony within that. Any others? Sisters?
Yeah. Earlier today, you talked about the different types of idolatry and how it can include hero worship. So my question is sort of an extension from your Wednesday halaqa, when you talked about one of the conditions to rectify one's heart is to find a spiritual teacher.
Yes.
So in a day, in the era of social media and content creators and influencers, how do we go about finding a teacher where it doesn't become hero worship or they maintain their integrity?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I could tell, when I talked about encouraging everybody that everybody should have a sheikh and everybody should have a mentor or sheikha or somebody female. because I've also benefited from having mentors and people that would advise me and correct behaviors, right? Actually, I think if I had one now, it would be very beneficial. Um, but what ends up happening is you'll see within circles, you'll see around a lot of these big sheikhs and famous influencers and famous speakers that they enter, they're larger than life, everybody's kissing their hand and everybody is fighting for time with them, and it becomes very dramatic. There's a lot of fanfare around them. Um, and as Muslims, there's a part of it which kind of rubs us the wrong way because, you know, the guidance is from Allah and not from the person, even if it's through the person. And that's the struggle, is for those people to, so the students should seek to respect their teacher, but the teacher should be the one that humbles himself or humbles herself. But what we see is the opposite effect. With the algorithm in social media works the opposite way. The more self-promoting you do, the more followers you have. So it incentivizes people to behave badly, right? So like if you're a social media influencer, right? If you confront people, if you challenge them, if you say, oh, so-and-so versus so-and-so, then you get all the hits, then you get all the likes, then you get all the comments, and then it goes viral. And so unfortunately, people are incentivized to get themselves in bad situations. Hero worship is a problem in Islam because then now you are thinking that the source of guidance is that person and not Allah. And that's when, if you start to think that, like if you start to think uncritically, the sheikh says, oh, this is what's right, and you don't consider, does this comport with the Qur'an and the Sunnah, then you have a problem. And sometimes people are allergic. You say, oh, Imam Shafi'i said that, so I follow that. And some people get really upset. They're like, well, why do we have to talk about what Imam Shafi'i said? We do have to talk about what he said. Doesn't he know the Qur'an and Sunnah better than us? We do. So some people are allergic to that, and then some people are on the opposite. They said, well, I'm just following what my sheikh says. I'm not going to consider the Qur'an and the Sunnah. So both are problematic. We use those people in order to inform us about what Islam says and guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask the sheikh, that's right. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for your patience. We covered a lot today. So next time will be a little bit lighter. Inshallah, we'll talk about Prophet Ibrahim. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He purifies our hearts, that He keeps us steadfast on guidance, that He keeps our families and our loved ones on the kalima of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that He makes them the light of our eyes, the joy and the comfort of our lives, and that He makes them leaders for muttaqeen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursaleen, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.